Hey, we are the Brothers Mahoney. I am Michael.
And I am James.
And we are back again, this time discussing another Big Finish audio production, The Land of the Dead. The Land of the Dead was written by Stephen Cole, who is a prolific writer in Doctor Who media, and was released January 2000. It runs at an hour and 55 minutes, and it features a fifth Doctor and Nyssa.
And this is an interesting spot in the timeline because, as we'll get to a bit later, the only spot this fits in is in between Time Flight and Arc of Infinity. Because, of course, at the end of Time Flight, Tegan leaves the TARDIS only to come back in the very next episode. So there's actually a prolific amount of short stories, books, audio dramas from Big Finish that take place in between this part, which is a very interesting place to do stories in. It much reminds me of later Fifth Doctor ones, which is just the Fifth Doctor on Tolo, or just the Fifth Doctor on Perry, which again which can only take place between certain stories because there's no real place in the series proper for them to fit elsewise. So it's just one of those fun things that expanded media got too well to expand on. The plot for this one is as follows. Landing in Alaska, the Doctor and Nyssa encounter a group of people in a most unusual house, cut off not only by the house climate, but by their individual secrets and obsessions. Millionaire Sam Bratt is utilizing chunks of the local area to construct a shrine to his dead father. But when deadly creatures start roaming outside and a terrifying discovery is made inside the house, the Doctor realizes that Bratt has unleashed an unimaginably ancient force.
Yeah, so this was a pretty interesting story. I think it's probably one of the better ones we've listened to. To be fair, at this point in time, we've only listened to 4 Big Finish stories. So it's somewhat slow going, but we are getting there. But this was, I think, a pretty good story. The Fifth Doctor has never been one of my personal favorites, but I thought he worked to pretty good effect in this story. And Nyssa is the companion who I don't think about near as often as many other companions, but I thought she also performed quite well. Of course, she was voiced by Sarah Sutton.
I think the Fifth Doctor worked better in this one overall than he worked in Phantasmagoria. I mean, I like Phantasmagoria enough, but because Tolo was separated from the Doctor, and this story has an amusing side character who the Doctor is able to interact with during the part that Nyssa isn't around, and Phantasmagoria didn't really have that. Yeah, there was someone there, but he wasn't pithy, he was okay, but he wasn't, amusing. But this had more scenes between the Doctor and his companion. Probably had more scenes between the Doctor and an amusing side character. I just think this one did the Fifth Doctor and Peter Davison more justice than Phantasmagoria.
And also the story itself is pretty interesting. Naturally, setting the story in Alaska is not commonplace for Doctor Who. And I think it's only been done, what you said, maybe once or twice before?
I think it's done one more time, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, some story called Locals at Sunlight's Odds, which is also a Big Finish story in the main range, with Sylvester McCoy and, Ace. And somebody who we don't even know, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, so I think it's a fun setting. Somewhat amusingly, once Nyssa and the Doctor land, the Doctor starts off lecturing and giving Nyssa a history, quite an unwanted history, on just pretty much everything about Alaska.
Yeah, which is funny because, of course, Nyssa's not even from Earth, so she doesn't. I enjoy some of the Doctor's first lines in this about how, Alaska was fine for, I forget exactly how he phrases it, but the only interest that the colonial powers had in Alaska has been the last 100 years, so we could steal the oil from the land, which is basically what the Doctor was saying, which is pretty funny and pretty true.
I also think it's funny because, of course, we saw in Phantasmagoria the Fifth Doctor lecturing Tolo on the history of cricket, so it just adds to the unwanted lessons he has to offer them.
Oh, no, but Tolo was loving the cricket lessons.
I think he much preferred the Phantasmagorias.
You know what? That would surprise me, honestly.
But yeah, the story is pretty fun. There's like a house in the middle of nowhere, and by middle of nowhere, we're talking about Alaska here. And the Doctor and Nyssa ran across some deformed animals, and then later, moving skeletons of mysterious origins. And is it just always a fun time?
Well, I think it's probably not a fun time, but nonetheless, it holds promise. But yeah, so these creatures named the Pomians, which that fifth Doctor named after the Pomian time period, which I'm not a well, I'm of course not an archaeologist, or I probably would be doing Doctor Who podcasts, but or live in Indiana. But yeah, I'm not. I watched The Land Before Time a couple of times, but I have a feeling that doesn't give me quite the background knowledge I need to know about the different eras of dinosaurs.
Yeah, all I really know about archaeology is that belongs in a museum.
Well, there's that, and of course, the beginning of Jurassic Park. But anyway, back to Doctor Who. Yeah, these apparently come from the Permian time period.
Yeah, which the doctor says is about 260 million years ago, which predates the dinosaurs. Now, I'm not much of a science guy myself, so I'll take his word for it. But yeah, these are some old mothers.
You could say that.
I think another thing that makes this toy or allows this toy to do more, and it's probably a good thing it did, because at an hour and 55 minutes or so, this was a bit longer than some of the previous ones, right?
Yes, it was the second longest one of the Big Finish ones we've listened to so far. The Sounds of Time did beat it by 10 minutes, but because they had other doctors, to me it felt like it went a little faster than that. But
yeah, so this one I think worked pretty well, and one of the reasons it did was because I felt most of the cast was pretty strong. So of course you have Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor and Sarah Sutton as Nyssa. But as James alluded to, there's also somewhat of a snarky, amusing side character that we got throughout the story, named Monica, who was played by or voiced by Lucy Campbell, and she was a lot of fun. We also had a Neil Roberts, who had some strong moments, especially I think in the last couple of episodes, and then Christopher Scott, who played somewhat of a eccentric old rich guy, and he had some moments to shine too.
I'm not sure he's actually either old, because wasn't he basically the same age as, what was his name, Too Long?
Yeah, he was, but he sounded so much older.
Or maybe that was the money that just made him sound older.
Yeah, rich people just sound like they're old, and I'm down with that. I think the standout, though, is probably Lucy Campbell, because her character is just so fun.
Yeah, she basically snugged her way through the entire story, which works out fine for me, because it really does roll well with the Doctor's character. About, as usual, around, a little before the halfway mark, Nyssa goes off with one of the other side characters to, I think they were going to do a biochemical analysis or something akin to that of one of these creatures, and the only place was a lab that was off-site. So she left, and so it's just the Doctor alone with this other woman who was just great fun all throughout.
Yeah, she was an interior designer, so that sort of adds to the finicky nature. The house that they were in was sort of themed, like the rooms on the ground floor. There was like a stone room and a bone room, a sea room, because the rich guy who had the house built wanted to sort of pay tribute to the land of Alaska. And this interior designer was in charge of making that work. And it was sort of fun when she was complaining about, oh, it's ruining the walls, or oh, hey, you're ruining the paint, Doctor. Yeah, she was just a fun character. She was also not just fun, but she was introspective toward the end. She learned some things that day.
But who doesn't learn it throughout their life, especially when they're being chased by these scary bone creatures? Speaking of scary bone creatures, as Michael said, these things came from, 260,000 million years ago, around there?
Yeah, give or take a couple million. I mean, at that point, does it matter?
Probably not, but I did enjoy Monica, which was, of course, the woman who was snarky, which is just what I call her, basically. Who really needs to remember her name when she has her attitude? I had a couple of great lines throughout this episode. Was it Nyssa who asked why the skeletons are moving around? Do you remember who asked that question?
I can't remember who asked it, but
or was it just her? Or was it just her pining to herself? Either way. And Monica's response to that question was just to spite us, because she doesn't like skeletons, because she consider them anesthetic. As an interior designer, that stuff actually matters to her. So that was pretty amusing. And furthermore, did you want to take this one?
Yeah. There was also a scene in which the Doctor wanted to get close to one of the creatures to investigate, to figure out more about it. And she replies, it's made of bones and it's horrible. I mean, what more past that does someone need to know? Yeah, so Monica made for a pretty good character. and I thought she was a lot of fun. She would have been even more fun if she had stuck around as a companion, but I guess we can't always get what we want.
That would have been interesting, but alas, yeah, that fate was not for us. A fun thing they did with the Alaska backdrop for this episode was have a couple of people who will put Koyokan, which is an Alaskan native peoples that have been around basically forever up there in Alaska. So these people, of course, had different spiritual beliefs than, well, I suppose our main characters, but most of the main characters, of course, like it's not like the Doctor had spiritual beliefs of Inu Rio sort, and most of the characters who got, I mean, we only got 4 characters in this one besides the Doctor and Nyssa, but they just, they were. One of them was, I believe, was he a full member of the Koyokans?
I do believe so, yeah. And then one of them was like half.
Yeah, half Koyokan, yes. And the full member, when things started going down, was believing it was the spirits of the animals, because their beliefs are more based around animism than just typical Christian beliefs. Because, of course, monotheism was not the exclusive belief that people had. There were a lot of others. And I mean, pantheism was a lot more popular than monotheism was for a long time in world history. And animism is just one of those things that more indigenous, native groups believe. And it's honestly more of an acceptable belief to me. I mean, I don't believe it, but I like it more than most versions of modern Christianity, or really any versions of Christianity, modern or otherwise. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, he believed that what was happening was the spirits kind of getting revenge on Sean Brunt, the rich guy who owned this house, because he was basically tearing apart the land to make the house, because he had different rooms that was actually made from different parts of the land. For example, he had this stone room, which was made from stone he took from the land. He had a timber room, of course, taken from the trees. And of course, the interior designer probably, got paid a lot to be able to make this work, because the stone room, it's not just made of, it doesn't just have stone around it. It's literally stone imported from outside, then made into the wall. For example, there was the sea room, which apparently not only had, seawater, again, from, the Alaskan, wilderness, it also had some animals in there as well. They just kept in there. And also, the fun part about that room was it was literally built into a rock face, which is a fascinating architectural design. But he even had a bone room, which I believe they were currently working on at the time the Doctor and Nyssa arrived. But it was made out of the bones that I don't know if he dug them up, or we know a bit of where he might have gotten some of them. But do not spoil anything, we won't go into that. But made out of bones, which is, from animals, mostly. I wouldn't be surprised if there might have been some human ones in there. It's not like they're going to decide which one he was human or which one was animal when they're actually making it. But yeah, that's a rather grisly conceit, and we can see why the guy whose name I honestly forget, who was full Koyakan, was so under the belief that the animal deities or spirits were getting revenge on Sam Brat, because that's kind of going a bit too far for most tastes, I would believe.
And Tulong, who shared half his ancestry with these people, didn't necessarily take to some of those beliefs at the beginning, but then, because of some of the influence of these mysterious creatures, he sort of, and it's not just him, Nyssa was having some massive headaches, and it negatively affected the rich guy. And it impacted this guy too, because he sort of started losing it during the second, third, and some of the fourth episode. He believed Nyssa was some type of spiritual guide to help keep him safe from the animals, and that the mother raven would never harm him if Nyssa was nearby. And Nyssa's keeps trying to say, hey, I'm not that. Don't think that way. Be rational, dude.
Well, the funny thing is that Nyssa kind of brought it upon herself, because the story actually starts with the Doctor and Nyssa coming to Alaska in, the 1960s, and they see a plane fly away from someplace, and they register an energy source, and then they go to the future by 30 years, and that plane was actually relevant to something that happened That was the Ava mentioned secrets and assassins that the plot mentioned. Now, they weren't the most amazing background secrets. It wasn't a psychological thriller novel, but it was a nice, fun little background story that Brad and Too Long had basically been against each other, even though Too Long worked for Brad. But they were basically opposed to each other for a long part of their life in terms of their personal histories.
And Nyssa's short following comes from that. She just references that, and then this guy thinks that she's some type of mystical force, and that just
because he saw a vision.
And that leads into his religious madness taking over, which happens sometimes with those folks.
Or to be fair, it was the influence of those creatures as well, so we can't completely blame him for that.
Yeah, but without the religious belief, he probably would have been fine. Just a few heartaches, Nyssa got by it, okay?
Oh yeah, but Nyssa was also mentally stronger anyway.
That she may have been. I did want to mention that one thing I thought this story lacked that the other stories had, I don't think any of the cliffhangers here were really that great. I think the one for episode 1 was probably the best, and Nyssa was sort of trapped in the sea room, and things seem to be attacking her. So the doctor is trying to get her out of the sea room, but the door is blocked. And I thought that was probably one of the best cliffhanger hit. It was a pretty decent cliffhanger, but I don't think the other two, I mean, one of them was okay, but I don't think any of them were particularly amazing in this case.
I probably liked the episode 1 cliffhanger more. I liked the episode 2 cliffhanger enough, where it's kind of a bit reversed, where the doctor is in a situation where he's about to be attacked by one of these creatures, and he makes an amusing comment right as he's about to get attacked. So that one was okay, but it did lack the urgency, I believe, as the very first cliffhanger had.
Yeah, and again with the Fifth Doctor, he's never been a favorite of mine, but I do think he has a lot of, quiet, amusing lines. He has a quiet humor about him. And I thought he worked well with Nyssa, and I thought he also worked quite well with Monica.
But so to quickly place this in the Doctor's timeline, of course, again, basing this on the TARDIS Wiki personal timelines for the Doctors. Of course, as we said earlier, this takes place in between Time Flight and Arc of Infinity. And to place it a little more in depth, talking about things beyond just the classic show, there was a 2004 BBC past Doctor adventure entitled Empire of Death, which took place immediately after Time Flight.
Which is a book, if you're not familiar with that BBC past Doctor adventure run.
Yeah, it looks to be a very fascinating run. My brother and I are working on collecting the books slowly because they cost a lot, but these look really interesting on the whole, honestly. And so this takes place after that and before one thing that will be coming up, I don't know, not too long, the Big Finish main Doctor Who reigns, number 10, which came out just after this same year, 2000. Entitled Winter for the Adapt. So I guess Nyssa's going to enjoy another cold place, if that title is anything to show for it. And yeah, so this takes place between those two as well.
Yeah, as for The Land of the Dead, I thought it's a pretty strong story. I don't usually, like I mentioned earlier, Nyssa is one of those companions who I don't really think about as much. Nothing against her, it's just that I'm not a big Peter Davison fan.
It does help that during Peter Davison's time there are usually so many companions about. To have taken the level needs to stand out from the crowd. Yeah, I mean, like the problem with the Doctor.
I mean, Lisa Tegan, is there really any difference?
Yes, there is.
There might be, but I may not know it yet.
There's actually a difference with Audric.
And those Cybermen, am I right? Yeah, Lisa's not really a companion to think about that much, and again, it's because I don't think about Davison's time that much, but I thought they worked quite well together. On the whole, I think Torlo probably makes a more interesting companion, but as far as stories go, while I'm not sure if I would say this is better than Phantasmagoria, I think it's at least on par with Phantasmagoria. And I think this duo, the Fifth Doctor and Nyssa, I think it made for a pretty fun time.
Yeah, I think that Sutton in Alaska really helps it, because it takes place over just one night in Alaska. There's, maybe nothing so bad as a blizzard, but they're having snowy weather. And so there are a couple of outdoor scenes you can kind of feel the cold in the air. And it doesn't help that right now it's about 30 degrees outside where we're living. So that maybe it's just that cold, but it helps highlight what it must have been like in Alaska this night.
It's better than that negative 32 you're having.
No, I liked it. And I'm sure that Dr. Nyssa also liked the negative 32 they likely had here. But well, maybe not Nyssa. But she did like the doctor's information about Alaska.
Yeah, and I think another strong element, along with the personality that the Doctor has and Monica as a side character, the story had a decent horror feel to it. I mean, this is giant. Well, I'm not sure how giant they are, but they did grow. But these skeleton monsters and these deformed animals outside, and it just had a nice little horror-ish feel to it. And as a individual who's a horror fan myself, I can dig that.
Yeah, the more horror influences with a Doctor Who story, as long as it's done well, of course, the more fun the story will probably be considered by us. Because it really works well with the Doctor.
Yeah, and to be fair, the story is called The Land of the Dead.
Yeah, and it was name dropped a couple of times throughout the story as well, and it was down to very good effect both times.
Yeah, and this also came out, what you said, 2000?
Yeah, it was the first Doctor Who Big Finish thing from 2000.
So
and of course, this is the main range, their fourth story.
So it also predates the George A. Romero movie of the same name. So take that, dude.
I am sure there is absolutely no crossover of people who would even consider such a thing.
The crossover, I can imagine, is quite small. Luckily, we are here to fill the gap. By we, I mean myself. So yeah, overall, I thought it was a pretty decent story. I would give it a 2 thumbs up, maybe. I don't know, 2.5 thumbs. Makes me miss the rest of my thumb.
That's horrible, but
I'm trying to be folksy.
But yeah, so coming up next, we have a second Doctor story starting off his very last season, The Dominators, which my brother and I have only seen once. And I remember being not bad, but certainly not among the Asalan that you could expect from a Troughton story. But funny enough, and I look forward to seeing it again.
And that, of course, has both Jamie and Zoe, two companions I think are quite fun, especially together.
Yeah, they just, those worked really well with the Doctor as companions.
So yeah, that one should be fun to watch. We've only seen a lot of classic Who stories once, so it's going to be nice to revisit them. I always enjoyed Patrick Troughton. I think he's quite a fun actor, so I look forward to it.
I do as well.
But that has been the Brothers Mahoney. I am Michael.
And I am James.
Have yourself a pleasant night.